All right, I was still muted there. All right, guys, Jeremy Knauff here with another episode of the Public Relations Declassified live stream. And we're going to go ahead and do another volume of our audience questions. And this is a format that we tried a couple weeks ago. We're going to be doing a lot more of these over time. So we're going to go ahead and go through 3 audience questions today. They've got specific questions on public relations, marketing, or branding. And so we're going to go ahead and play their questions, followed by my answers to their questions. Now, if any of you guys have specific questions that you'd like answers to, just get with me. You'll see, if you haven't seen the previous episode that we did like this, you will see today kind of what that format looks like, how you need to record your video. But basically, all you have to do is record a quick selfie video asking your question. You might as well, say your name, say your company, and maybe a little bit of context so that people understand who you are and what you do, so that that question makes sense to them from your perspective as well. But also, since these are going to be live, they're going to be sitting on YouTube and Facebook to a lesser degree, right? Because Facebook deletes our videos after a period of time. I think it's 30 or 60 days or something like that. But they will live on YouTube indefinitely. So you're also getting an opportunity to get some more exposure out there as well. So you'll get your questions answered and you'll get exposure. So wins all the way around. All right. That being said, we are going to roll into our first question, which is from our friend John.
Hey, Jeremy, thanks for taking my question. If I could only focus on one PR channel this year to get the biggest return, which one should I focus on?
All right. So that's a great question. We're all busy. We've all got a finite amount of budget. We can't do all things all at once. So we do absolutely have to narrow down what we're going to do. And when it comes to PR, there's a lot of different strategies to how you approach this. Some require a larger investment of time and money. Some require a smaller investment of time and money. Some will produce results faster, some slower. So it really comes down to what you're trying to achieve. But if you're starting from scratch and you want to just pick one aspect of public relations to focus on, then what I would generally suggest for most people is getting on podcasts. And there's a number of reasons for that. The first is just pure numbers. There is a tremendous amount of podcasts out there. 4.5 million was the last stat that I saw, and that was as of 2026. And people are starting new podcasts every day. So you have far more podcasts compared to media outlets. So there's a lot more opportunities to be featured somewhere in terms of sheer volume, right? So that's a really good opportunity to get out there, get in front of a lot of people, create some powerful assets that showcase you as an expert in your industry. And it's going to be a lot easier in terms of the barrier to entry as well. So if you're pitching a journalist, first of all, you have to find their contact information. You have to pitch them. You have to cut through all the noise and keep in mind they're being pitched by a ton of people. Whereas with a podcast, it's a lot easier to get to the right people. They're not as selective when it comes to who they choose to bring on the podcast compared to something like Fox News or the New York Times or Yahoo Finance or any of these large media outlets, right? So the barrier to entry is a lot lower. And part of that is because all of these podcasts, or at least most of them, right? Because most podcasts do bring on guests. Most are not just one person talking and sharing information. Most podcasts are people interviewing guests. So all of these podcasts need guests to continue creating great content that their audience is going to continue to consume. So there's one of the big reasons why the barrier to entry is lower when it comes to podcasts. The other is they're going to receive far fewer pitches. If you guys had seen the inbox of most journalists, it would blow your mind. A lot of them get hundreds or thousands of pitches every single day. That's a lot of shit to filter through. And I say shit because frankly, most of the pitches are shit. But when it comes to podcasts, Most podcasts are not getting anywhere near that volume of pitches. Now, there are, of course, outliers. You look at something like Joe Rogan, for example, massive podcast. In fact, I think it's for a while, it was the largest podcast with, as far as audience goes. But even a podcast like that generally doesn't get the same volume of pitches as a typical journalist. So there's a lot less noise to cut through. And then they also tend to have a little bit less ego. So a journalist is usually looking for a much higher profile person to feature in whatever they're doing, whether it's an article, TV segment, even radio segments, right? They expect a certain caliber of person, someone who's already at the top of their game, somebody who is already considered a well-known, well-respected authority in their industry. That bar gets a little bit lower when it comes to podcasts. And of course, the smaller the audience, the lower that bar goes. So that makes it a lot easier here. The other is you have a lot more proximity to the decision maker. So when it comes to journalists, you might pitch the journalist, but they still have to run it up the chain to their editor or their producer. And there may even be somebody above them as well making decisions. So, and you will never know who those people even are, because if you don't have the ability to go and dig through extensive media databases, you're not going to know who's that journalist boss or their boss's boss. So you have to really understand all those relationships, know who's who, and have the contacts to get things across the finish line when it comes to a media outlet. With a podcast, it's generally going to be the podcast host. They're the final decision maker. And you can usually find them on social media, right? They're out there, they're active. They've usually got a community of some sort. They're promoting their stuff online. So you have an ability to get out there and build and nurture a relationship with them, whereas you may not be able to do that as easily when it comes to a journalist or a producer or an anchor or somebody of that nature. All right, the other thing is long-term exposure. So when you're in a media feature, that's great. I love media features. Obviously, that's, the bread and butter of our business. They will tend to rank for your name. In a lot of cases, you won't get a ton of exposure directly from that piece. It's more what you do with that piece afterwards, right? Because it's going to go on their website, or, if it's on TV and it's only on TV, then it's a one-time hit. In which case you need to get a hold of the video file, which is something we do for our clients all the time. But with a podcast, it is typically going to be on all the podcast platforms, right? So the podcast app on Apple, the Stitcher app, there's a lot of these different podcast apps, and then there's also aggregators. So all of that podcast information with your name and all that stuff is going to be across all of these platforms, so people can come across these. You also have YouTube. Most podcasts will post, or maybe I shouldn't say most, but a lot of podcasts will also post to YouTube as well. So not only would you potentially be viewable on their channel, but there's also a good chance that you just come across their feed if they're scrolling through YouTube. And then, of course, you've got the website. So that podcast, in a lot of cases, will have a website, whether it's on the person's regular business site or they've got a specific website just for the podcast itself. So these are all ways that you can continue reaching more and more people, especially if those things come up in search. And that's one of the other cool things about this is the more podcasts you do, the more times your name is going to show up in search if somebody searches for your name. So there's more assets out there to potentially rank for your name. So hope that answers your question, John. And if you have any more questions, feel free to send us in another one. All right. Next up is going to be Stephanie Nelson.
Hey there, just coming to you from Southern Alabama today, just driving home. I just wanted to ask you this question. What do journalists and podcast hosts look for?
Okay, another great question. And when it comes to journalists and podcast hosts, they've got the same goals. They want somebody who's credible, somebody who can bring valuable information to their audience, in a way that's going to drive eyeballs. It's going to drive more people to that outlet. It's going to get more people engaging on their outlet. So one of the first things they're going to look for is authority, right? Are you a legitimate expert? And there's a few ways that they can identify that. The first is search. So they're going to go and Google your name and they're going to see what comes up. Are they going to see a lot of positive things, or are they going to see negative things, or are they going to see nothing, right? If they're not seeing positive things, that's going to definitely hurt your credibility. If they see negative things, well, no question there. If they don't see anything, it's not necessarily going to hurt your credibility, but you're just not going to have any credibility. You're not going to have any authority. So we want to make sure that we've got solid things in the search results. So obviously you want all of your social media profiles out there. If you've got media features, you want to do things that are going to get those things to rank. Some will rank just by the virtue of existing. Others, you may have to do things like link to them from other websites, or even use some black hat SEO to do that. You also want to see third-party validation. And that's where, the media features plays a role, absolutely, but also customer testimonials, client testimonials. And if you can do those as video, that's especially powerful, because it's other people who have worked with you and they're taking the time out of their day to create a video talking about their experience with you and the value that you have brought to them through whatever it is that you do. And that's something that gives a journalist a really good sign that you are, in fact, an authority in your industry. And then the third thing is reviews. So reviews are huge. I talk about this from a PR perspective all the time. They also help from a conversion standpoint, right? If you're talking to a prospect and they go and they look you up and they see dozens or hundreds of positive reviews, that says something to them, but it also says something to the journalists. Not quite as powerful as video testimonials when it comes to journalists, but you can get reviews on like Google business profiles and Facebook pages and Yelp and whatever other platforms. In fact, we've done an episode here previously on getting reviews, how to get them, how to leverage them, how to get the most out of them, all of that. You guys should check that one out. But the more reviews that you have, the more authoritative you are. And think about it like this. Let's say you've got a lot of reviews. That doesn't just say that you've worked with a lot of people and they've been happy. It goes a little bit deeper than that, because if you've worked with a lot of people, that also means you've had a lot more opportunities than someone who's only worked with a few people to fuck things up. And you didn't fuck things up, right? If you've got a, five-star reviews for like most of your reviews, you got a good, 4.9, 5.0 rating, something in that range, that's usually a pretty good sign, because you've not only the people who have worked with you are saying good things about you, but you've worked with a lot of people. So there's a lot more opportunities to screw up. And we all know business is tough. It's really easy for things to go sideways. So if you've got a large number of reviews and they're mostly positive, that says a lot about you. So that carries a lot of weight with journalists. Okay. The other thing they're looking for is the ability to communicate. And I will tell you that most people, frankly, are not great at this, right? Most people, when they answer, they're either answering a question incredibly short, or they're just going on and on and on and rambling. So you have to master concisely answering the question in a very powerful way, but it has to give real value to the audience. It has to give them something that when they hear what you're saying, they're going to walk away from that and be able to do something. They're going to be able to improve something, or they're going to know something they didn't know that will either create opportunities for them or protect them from potential risks, potential harm. Being concise and being clear is critical here. And when it comes to being clear, one of the things that you can do that really give you a lot of impact is avoiding industry buzzwords. So if you're talking to the media, you want to make sure that you're communicating in a way that the average person who knows nothing about your industry will still be able to understand you. It's a mistake I see a lot of people make. They talk to a journalist and they're taking certain knowledge, for granted. So they might, if they're talking about a highly technical topic, but that understanding that topic relies on understanding several other previous topics, you can't just assume that everybody knows those other previous topics. So you have to break things down in a way that the average person who does not have your knowledge and experience would still understand what you're saying, and they understand the impact and the importance of what you're saying. And beyond that, they're also looking for flexibility. So I'll give you a good example here. First of all, when a journalist wants to talk to you, that's when they want to talk to you. Right? They're not going to sit there and, come back next week or come back next month or whatever. They're going to move on to the next person. You're not Elon Musk. You're not some giant person that everyone is just hanging on your every word. I had an experience in this particular area with a client a few years ago where we had landed them a homepage feature at the top of Fox News, right? And I called him and I was like, look, here's what we got. We got to go ahead and get these answers to this thing real quick. Within the next hour or so, we have to get on the phone for 15 minutes. He's like, well, I'm out at a bachelor party right now. Just have them call me back next week. And I'm like, look, dude, that's not how this works. Nobody's going to call you back next week. This piece is a done deal. You're going to be featured prominently on Fox Business homepage at the top of the damn page. And you're like, hey, I'm out playing golf with some buddies. Let's do this next week. No, they're going to move on to the next person. They've got deadlines. They've got to get the piece out. You have to be available when they need you and how they need you, right? In some cases, it may be timing. In other cases, it may be being on site rather than being virtual. A lot of journalists, when it comes to TV, for example, they don't want to do remote Zoom interviews. They want to be on site somewhere. They want to have a good, compelling visual aspect to that TV segment. There's one journalist here locally in Tampa that I work with a ton. He will do Zoom every now and then, but generally speaking, he wants to be on site somewhere. He wants to create a compelling visual element to his TV segments. So if you're not going to be willing to either have him come out to your facility or you go somewhere that's going to work for him, then you're probably not going to get that feature. So they need for you to be flexible. They need for you to be able to adapt to what they need to make the best piece of content for their audience. So Stephanie, hope that helps. And if you have any more questions, feel free to send us another one. All right, next up is Brian Trippe.
What's up, Jeremy? What's up, group? My name is Brian Trippe. I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm a real estate investor. I'm an influencer as well. I have a podcast. I have a great YouTube channel and put out a lot of content around real estate, showing people how to get started, showing people the different nuances in real estate. I guess my PR question for Jeremy would be, there are a lot of people with my name or that have like a variation of my name. If you put in Brian Trippe real estate to Google, I come right up and I'm all over Google. But if you just put in Brian Trippe, there's a few different ones, if you can believe it. And there's a lot of them. Actually, there's some influencers. There's a podcaster named Brian Trippe without an E at the end, but his name comes up. So what do you do? How do you kind of rise above all the other Brian Trippes out there? Or if someone has your name with kind of the spelling that you have it. So that would be my PR question for you, Jeremy. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So that's a great question from Brian. I love this one because it's something I've run into a few times, and there's definitely some great ways to overcome this. My preferred method would come from the movie Highlander, which basically you go and eliminate all the other Brian Trippes. But that's probably frowned on in society. Mass murder is not ideal. So we are going to find different ways to do that. And there's a few hacks that you can do. But ultimately, this is going to require a fair amount of effort, especially if that other person with a similar name is high profile. Now, I've had some situations with this where we've crushed it and taken over the results for that name. And there's also been some other cases where we have not been able to. So in one example, we were doing something for Matt Andrews, and there also happens to be and for anyone who doesn't know him, he runs a mastermind in the real estate space. There's another Matt Andrews who's actually a professor at Harvard who has multiple published papers. He's got some books, a lot of authority out there. And initially, He was the one that ranked for everything related to that name. While we were working with Matt, we got our Matt to be the top name and actually even earned him a knowledge panel and took over the search results for his name. Got someone else right now, David Bell, who we've worked with for a while, but he shares a name with a famous sports player. Haven't quite cracked that one yet. Sports players of any type tend to have a ton of media coverage. They tend to have a ton of social media activity, so it's a little bit tougher. Most of you, if there's somebody out there with a similar name, it probably will not be quite as competitive as that example. But the groundwork is going to be the same across the board. So first of all, you want to make sure you've got all of your social media profiles. Even if you're not active on a platform, you need to have a profile there. And the handle, which is the part in your address bar at the end, right? So it's like facebook.com/Brian Trippe, for example. That's going to help those rank for your name. And then you want to start building a ton of content. You want to start getting a lot of engagement. The more engagement there is on a profile, the more likely it is to rank higher in the search results. You also want to have a website for your name. So ideally, your first name, your last name.com. Obviously I own jeremyknauff.com. So whatever your name is, try to get that as a .com. If it's not available as a .com, then I would go for a non-traditional TLD. I would not do a .net. I would do something like a .me or .pro or God, I don't know. There's hundreds, maybe thousands of various types of domain extensions. If somebody already who has the same name as you already has a website up, that's going to make this infinitely more challenging. But having your name as a domain is going to help to push that into the search results. The more content you put there, the better. The more links you build to the website, the better. And the more frequently you update it, the better. Those will all play a significant role in the ranking. Media features are, of course, a huge part of this. Any media, like an article, TV segment, which will typically be just a video embedded into an article. That's how you see it with a lot of outlets. They'll have the article on the topic, and then the video from the TV segment will be embedded into that. Those tend to rank really well because the media outlets are seen as very authoritative by Google. So they tend to rank pretty well. Books are another great one. If you have one or more books published on Amazon, you've got an Amazon author page. They tend to rank pretty well in the search results. And the fact that you've written a book will also further improve your authority status. You can also throw links at that. You can link to it from your website. You can link to it from other articles. You can link to it from all kinds of places. And you can even use black hat SEO tactics. Other websites are another huge aspect. So IMDb is a great example of this. If you've been in movies, IMDb is something you can be in. If you have a podcast, you can also submit your podcast to IMDb. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do in IMDb, which tends to rank really well in the search results. And that helps you to take over more spots in the search results. And then all of these things kind of holistically tied together then play a role in triggering what's known as a Google Knowledge Panel. So this is something that if you guys search if you don't know what a knowledge panel is, if you search my name, you'll see one. It's that little thing across the top of the screen and then down the sidebar where it's got a bunch of images. It's got a bunch of links to other websites. It's got all this information. And that's something that Google triggers algorithmically. It's not a thing you can apply for. It's not a thing you can ask for in any way. Google is looking for certain signs that you're an authority based on all the stuff they find online. And when that knowledge panel is triggered, you need to go claim it. You'll see 3 little dots up there near the top of it. That's something that is a huge signal. And I will tell you, only one person can claim a knowledge panel, and there can only be one knowledge panel for a name. So if you have the opportunity to claim it, you need to do that immediately. Like literally the second you see that, whatever you're doing, stop and go and claim that knowledge panel, because that is going to give you access to that knowledge panel. Now, you can't edit the knowledge panel. You can basically make suggestions, and then Google will either implement or not implement those changes. So you don't have a ton of control over it. But this is something that, A, it presents you in a very authoritative way, but B, it now positions you as the version of that person. And from that point on, you pretty much dominate the search results, even if someone else had that name. Now, it's worth noting that in order to get that knowledge panel, you have to do a lot of the things that we've already talked about. Google has to see all of these signs that you are authoritative, that you are a prominent person in your industry, and then they trigger that. So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation, right? You have to do all the things for that to trigger, but then once that's in place, you are now seen as the authority. So it would make it a lot harder for any of these other digital assets from someone else with the same name to show up higher in the search results. So it plays a huge role there. And then just across the board, activity will help you to get this stuff ranking better. So when it comes to social media, the more content you post, the more engagement that you have, those are going to play a role in how highly your social profiles rank. When it comes to your website, and you should have your name, but you've also got your company website, right? These are two separate websites. The more content, the more good, useful content that you're posting there, the higher those websites will rank. Links are another huge part. So traditional link building methods are great, but again, you can also use Black Hat. It's not like back around the 2012 era when Google was coming real hard against all these tactics. They don't do that anymore. So use whatever link building tactics you can find. Use whatever is going to work to move the needle. I will tell you that the Black Hat stuff is a single Black Hat link tends to be a lot less effective than a single legitimate high quality link. But with Black Hat, you can build a massive number of links a lot more quickly to move the needle. I do find that Black Hat is a lot easier to build links. And if you know how to do that, and it's worth noting that when it comes to Black Hat SEO, it's a lot more difficult. It's a lot more technical. You have to really understand this stuff at a deep level to be able to make it work. But regardless of how you build your links, the more links pointing back to your websites, your social media profiles, your podcast, your book, all of these things that we talked about, the more links pointing to them, the higher that all of your stuff will rank. So we want to be active in posting content, and we want to be active in link building. So Brian, I hope that answers your question. And if you have any more, feel free to send them over. And we'll go ahead and segue into Jeremy's PR PSA today, which is how you show up in the search results, how people perceive you. So the first page of Google needs to position you as an authority. So when somebody Googles you, what they see is going to determine how your brand is perceived. If they don't see anything, or if they see something negative, that's going to make it a lot harder to get featured in the media. That's going to make it a lot harder for you to convert prospects into clients even. So we want to take control of the search results. We want to control what people see so that we can better control how people perceive us and our brand. So that's going to be a wrap for today, guys. Look forward to seeing you all on the next episode. If you guys found something valuable in this, I would love it if you'd share it with someone. If you're not already subscribed to us on YouTube, go ahead and head over there and hit that subscribe button. And I'd love it if you drop a comment while you're there. All right, guys, that is a wrap for today, and I will see you on the next episode. Thanks, everyone.